Woodworking in living rooms or kitchens was not unusual until recently when folks left the home for the factories. Yeah, well, I've often wondered if Joseph was basically working out of their one room or if he did have a little shop space. Yeah, there's tons of great images through the ages of the workshop at Nazareth, and of course it's all representative of whatever culture or time that painting came from. So you have all sorts of inaccurate historical details, but they all point to a similar common denominator, which is Mary, Joseph, and Jesus are all there. And so Jesus would either be watching Joseph in a lot of these paintings, or he'd be playing, often with building blocks, offcuts from his woodworking project at the time. So I think those artists through the centuries have kind of shown us what it probably was like, even if the historical details aren't right. I think the family details are. This community of work and prayer and love. Yeah, still trying to realize it.
Welcome to Good and Decent, a podcast by Grotto Network. Season 2, Episode 2, Finding Home. Daniel Baker is a local woodworker here in South Bend, Indiana. Daniel's not your typical woodworker, though. He uses only hand tools for his work, like saws, axes, and planes. He doesn't use a single power tool or machine. I heard about Daniel's work through a friend, and once I saw his breathtaking work, I knew I had to do a story on him.
I have noticed, and a lot of people have noticed, that there's been an increase in interest in this sort of thing, stuff that's well made, but also not crazily priced. People want to purchase it because it's just not that much of it out there, and people are beginning to appreciate quality a bit more. They're tired of throwing away their furniture every 5 or 10 years, so I'd like to be the village carpenter who offers something different. And if I could just build relationships with a handful of folks here, that's all the business I think I'd need or desire.
I remember going over to Daniel's on the day of the shoot. As I walked up the steps to the front of his house, a sign read, 24-hour protection by St. Joseph. I walked into the house, greeted warmly by Daniel, his dog Barley, and his wife and baby. Handmade wooden furniture decorated the house sparsely, and tucked away in what used to be a spare bedroom was Daniel's workshop. The clean scent of wood filled the air, with wood shavings covering the ground, all of his tools strung on the walls like what you'd see at an old antique shop.
It helps with simplicity of life, kind of just a tightly knit local community, working close to home. In Jesus' time, it wouldn't have been unusual. In fact, up to very recently, it wouldn't have been unusual for folks to work out of their homes. Woodworking in living rooms or kitchens was not unusual for a lot of cultures and a lot of times until recently when folks left the home for the factories. So I'd like to recapture some of that. And so I just want a job that allows me to keep family at the center of everything, while also putting my gifts and talents to work for little Eve.
At one point, Daniel took me into his backyard, and we walked into an area next to his garage full of scrap wood and tree logs. Daniel picked a log from a pretty good-sized tree, and within 5 minutes, he had it split open and started telling me what he could make out of it.
Right here, I could probably get chair legs, nice walnut chair legs out of this section. This might be the crest or the headrest of a chair. So that's what that could be for potentially. This is beautiful quarter well, this is quarter split, but they call it quarter sawn oak. These beautiful stripes in it. So that's what a lot of high quality furniture is made with, and I just got it out of that log in the backyard that would have been mulch.
Daniel finished putting the final touch on a bench and told me he was ready to deliver it.
So yeah, this is actually for my friends and neighbors with whom I lived for a while. They're just catty corner to us here. And so this will be just, I'll walk this down the alley and drop off the 2 benches, and then when I finish the table, I'll bring that over to them as well.
He picked up the bench, and I followed him as he carried it outside and down the block. He approached the house and knocked on the door.
Hey, I'm here with the bench and the film crew.
Thanks so much. We're so excited. So we might be hosting Thanksgiving this year.
Oh, great.
So we're especially excited.
I'm really glad it'll be able to get used for that. And a woodworker, they're there from the cradle to the coffin. So you walk beside people. If you're their village carpenter, you're there often for a lot of the, even if only through your furniture, a lot of the milestones of their life. I think making something for someone is more than a financial transaction. It really helps to build a relationship of trust and mutual dependence and responsibility towards one another. I know who this is going to, and I know that I'm going to be responsible for if it breaks, because I might be the one sitting on it while it breaks. It's part of being a good neighbor to make this well. And it helps, keeps me honest by making it for folks whom I know.
Sounds like you can hear the effort and labor it takes to do this stuff that is probably mostly made by machines everywhere else.
When I saw this for the first time, when he delivered the piece, it was really interesting. It was just beautiful to see the progress, of the piece. So
yeah, and his just pride of, it's not even ownership, pride in workmanship.
Mm-hmm.
When he said, most of our furniture lasts 5 to 10 years. I mean, I've moved 7 times in the last 10 years. And there's always furniture that gets just broken after a few years. It just gets tossed, or like you said, this could end up just being mulch. I mean, he was talking about the wood in his backyard, but I think about how much of, the things that I own feel more disposable than they should. And here he's trying to make something that is
lasting.
Yeah, that is a lifelong piece.
I think it's beautiful to have stuff like that. We're still trying to figure that out in our household, just trying to have lasting stuff, not just things that we buy off of Facebook Marketplace, but where do we start and what's worth investing in and not, you know?
So Adrienne, you moved to town recently and started a new job and kind of a cross-country move.
Yeah, from Florida to Indiana, it's been a bit of a difference. Especially
yesterday when you woke up, it was 11, the wind chill was 11 degrees, I think. So I'm sure that was a little different.
Yeah, I don't think I've ever seen 11 on on my weather app.
I know. Wait till it gets single digits. That's going to scare you.
Oh yeah, well it was really close yesterday.
Yeah. So how has the process been of the move here and getting settled, finding new furniture, but also, I'm sure, looking for lots of things in this new place? Yeah,
it's definitely been a challenge to us. My wife and I got married just before we moved here. We got married in April, moved over here in May, and it's been a transition. And we found out just before we moved, days before, that she was pregnant.
Oh my gosh.
I'm like, oh man. So it's don't lift anything heavy, we'll take care of it. And then we had to do a cross-country road trip within a span of 3 days from Florida to Indiana with my pregnant wife, we're still reeling, oh man, this is a lot to take in.
Totally, so many transitions compressed into one.
So I started the job remotely in Florida in end of February, early March. And then in April, knowing that on April 23rd, we'd be getting married. And after that, we'd go on honeymoon. And then in May, move. May, like end of May is when we made the like transition, got a house, we were able to find a house before then, thanks be to God. And, but just before the move, like 3 days before the move is when we found out Sarah was pregnant.
Wow.
So it was a lot. It was kind of, just felt like life was being thrown at you,
Yeah.
But,
because it was, the plan to move, finding out you're now going to have a baby, and then actually having to execute the move. And when did you actually get your feet planted in South Bend? When was that?
That was end of May, like the 23rd, like a month, literally a month after we
marriage.
got, yeah.
Wow.
So it was, and all this time prior to the marriage, we're prepping for the wedding, and so like juggling a new job, prepping for the wedding, that's another thing that was just a layer. So now it was then the move and the job, and then now it's pregnancy and the job. So it's been a lot, not that it's been hard to handle, but it's just like too hard to handle, but it's been somewhat of a transition for us to kind of learn how to be husband and wife while also preparing to be mom and dad.
Right. Oh my gosh. Yeah. And you're settling into this new home. How do you like it?
Yeah. Well, it's great. We got a really great deal on this home that's beautiful, and it's old. It's like made in the 1920s.
Wow.
So it's like about 100 years old now. And we are renting it. Great homeowners that let us rent it for a pretty good price. It's just we haven't really settled in to make it. It feels like home, but not really, because I think our hearts are still kind of in Florida. Like all of our family's still down there. A lot of our friends are still down here, and we really haven't made a lot of new friends here yet either. So
yeah, and it's been hard. The conditions have been hard for people. I mean, everyone's still feeling out, socializing and whatnot. And I do kind of feel like as a, adult, I feel like young, I don't even know if we can classify ourselves as young adults anymore. I'll cling to that title. But, as a young adult, as a person who maybe is recently married or, still in the first, 10-ish years out of school, like, how do you find people? I mean, friends are always just this built-in thing. And I think we talk about that a lot here at Grotto. It's like, how do you find community? And I think, our story here of Daniel Baker, like, it sounds like a big part of his, desire to be a woodworker and to work, the kind of original work from home. Just bringing us back to working from home.
The OG,
Yeah, but that he's trying to do that to, like, be connected to his community.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of us, it's like, hopefully we find some people we like through work. Mm-hmm. And it's not easy to just start from scratch and hopefully build a community like something that he has.
Absolutely. I mean, I was lucky enough to be blessed with, like, when I moved to college, I got a really good friend group and, like, ton of great friends from there. And then when I moved to my job, my first job in Central Florida, I was plugged into this, like, invited into this community that became, like, my best friends. So, like, that was my, like, standard. Like, I'd move and I'll find a good community. But that wasn't the case for here. So, like, I mean, again, it's different circumstances. I'm married now, so I'm not going to, like, the social events like I used to. And my wife had a really rough pregnancy in the beginning, so we couldn't go anywhere as much. I mean, we went to a couple of small groups and Bible studies, but didn't really pan out to gain too much community from there. So that's still, it's definitely a challenge, like it's definitely a learning thing, especially when you're just married. You're like, your friends kind of look different now. You're not, hanging out with too many single people. You're now making friends with other parents or other married couples. So how does that look like? How do you find that? It's kind of challenging.
When you and Sarah talk about what you want out of this chapter of your life, like, what does home look like? What do you want out of a place to call home?
I think for us right now, it's a matter of, like, building this home for our daughter, and so everything that we've talked about, it's kind of comes to mind, like, oh, we want to have a community of people who can be there for for me and our daughter, like if God forbid something happens to us, there is going to be someone here in the state, this city, that can step in and help, with our daughter. Obviously we don't want anything like that to happen, but that would be the goal. And I would love to say, we have a great team here at Grotto, so I know I'll have support there in any case. But when you're preparing this home for our kid, it's just like we want to make sure that though this may not feel like home for us, this is like the home for her. Like
right, it's the only home she'll know, at least at first.
Yeah,
it's kind of special. Yeah, you're like really preparing the environment for someone to have their first experience of everything in the world. Right, and she'll get to have new experiences that we didn't have as a child, and she'll see snow much earlier than when me and my wife saw snow. It won't even be surprising.
Right, it won't even be like that magical feeling, whatever. So it's when we prep and when we talk about this, we just want to, whatever it is, whatever it looks like, we just wanted to benefit our daughter at the long run. Yeah. What does it entail? I think right now the main thing is like that this is a sturdy home for her, a safe home for her to be in, but also we have that community that she can have friends that are also our friends have children that she can play with and have friends in before she goes to school. Obviously those formative years are great to have those friendships built in. So yeah, those are the two, I think, main things that we want to find. Yeah. And we're trying to strive for. But and it takes time.
Totally. It's like our natural, deep desire for human connection. We want that in the place we call home, And I love the image of, this guy bringing over his wood bench to his neighbor so that she can host Thanksgiving. I mean, there's so much like this web of connectedness that is facilitated by like a tangible thing, like a bench that someone has made. And not just that someone picks up at IKEA. No shame to IKEA. I'll probably be shopping there soon. But that there's something like this came from the hands of the community, passed on to someone else, and then, facilitates even more hospitality and generosity and connectedness.
I think things like that is what kind of builds community into somewhat of a family, Like you have these family heirlooms that get passed down here and there, and that doesn't, I don't know, like when you have something like, bench that might get passed down when somebody moves, like, I think that kind of builds that even more into, a resemblance of a family and a family heirloom of sorts. So it's really cool.
So he said something like, my work is really cradle to coffin, accompanying people. And when I first heard that, I'm like, I had to think, what does he mean? And I realized, he's talking about he could literally build someone a cradle and build someone a coffin. You think that's what he meant? Yeah. I mean, there's this sense that like we need, it's funny, I never even think of like needing furniture. Yeah. You think you actually need a piece of furniture for a baby. Yeah. And you do like just often are laid to rest in a piece of furniture. You don't really think about that. Right. But it's a little morbid. But but there's a beautiful life cycle. I think what he was describing is that he said you can stand shoulder to shoulder, side by side. Yeah. With someone, with anyone as they journey from welcoming their first child to maybe saying goodbye to their first parent or something who has passed. So and I think like that is really what I long for in home is people who are going to be there side by side through the most joyous of times, like you guys getting ready to welcome your daughter into the world, and then the most the times where I'm grieving the most, and then everything in between, all the little ups and downs.
Yeah, that's something that I think is irreplaceable in any place. Any like whether it be family or community, just people in your life. If you have that, I think, not to be corny, but that's all you really need.
I know you were talking about being recently married and how your community is changing. And I'm not married, and so I actually had a group of girlfriends last year. We decided to start a little kind of women's group where we'd have dinner.
Yeah.
We'd have dinner together and talk. And I might have shared about this on the pod already. But something we said when we got together, 3 of us got together over happy hour to brainstorm this, what we would do. And we just felt this desire to like be together in a kind of deep connected way like family is, because none of us have family in town, in this state.
Right.
And so it was really important to us to be like, we're not just these like single isolated people,
Yeah.
you know, and we all live alone too. And that's kind of unique, I think. I still think a lot of people, you know, some of my friends still have roommates, some of us live alone. But the 3 of us who sat down, we all lived alone. And we were like, we really desire this intentional period of connecting with people who are in our state of life, who have similar concerns, similar desires, and then a longing just for connection. So and something we said is like,
That's so
just because you're single doesn't mean you don't belong to anyone. And that just was very important to us to say, you know, we don't have a specific family in the sense of a spouse or a partner or children, but we can belong to each other and we can be that for each other. That if something were to happen, you know, I've called these girls and said like, I'm not going to make it home in time to let my dog out. You have the spare key. Will you run over? You know, and or, you know, just someone will put a calendar invite on my calendar and say, can you take me to the airport? You know, and it's like those things, those spaces where family naturally jumps in, we have tried to be there for each other. And it's just totally transformed the way. And I was new to town just over a year ago, a year and a half ago, totally transformed the way that I view this as home.
Yeah.
And this place has now become somewhere I think of as the most at home I've ever felt. I think because of those women
awesome.
and the way we belonged, we intentionally wanted to belong to each other.
I think like what you shared about your friends, you know, finding that community amongst your girlfriends and stuff. We know what it takes to find that community. It's just a matter of like really executing it and having, I guess, the courage to go out there and invite people to your home and say, hey, we're going to host a game night and we'd love for you to come. And just doing going the extra mile, I think is really beneficial to find your community. We know what it takes to get to that point, but sometimes we can be, you know, so overwhelmed by just the transition that we don't make it. Like my wife and I know what it, like we just have to invite people over, have some like community there, have some dinner together, you know, with people, and it will naturally happen. But
yeah, there's a total snowball effect. Like if 2 people are really invested in, you know, showing up for each other and they invite a 3rd person in, it snowballs and it can grow. And my takeaway is something actually my friend Megan recently said to me, which was, become what you want to attract. And I don't think she originated that, but we can give her credit. But she actually said it in dating, but I think it's also good for friend dating. You know, if you want to be the kind of person who has, you know, for her, it was like, I want to be the kind of person who is well-read. So she's devoting a lot of time to reading. She's now joined a book club. Well, that's built in, you know, community and friendship. She also has hobbies, like she goes to a ceramics studio. And, you know, she's building this kind of life that she really, really wants. And I think naturally people who are attracted to either having those similar interests or to that kind of lifestyle will be drawn to that.
Yeah.
And I think, you know, you see that with Daniel Baker too. Like, he wants to be the kind of person that, and he is attracting similar people. You know, it seems like his community has a similar kind of life philosophy as him. But become what you want to attract. And I think like what you said, the snowball effect.
The snowball effect. And just
bring people in.
Being patient with it, right? I think that's the most important part is that it's not going to be built overnight. Like I said in the beginning, earlier, I had this idea that it would happen immediately, but it's just not the case. It's not going to happen that way always. You're going to get lucky sometimes, and that's going to be a blessing. That's really cool. But having patience and just growing your community, it like, what's the quote? Rome wasn't built in a day, you know, like just kind of let it happen, and it'll happen. Yeah. It'll happen eventually. That's what me and my wife just keep saying. It'll happen eventually.
Yes, and baby's coming in January.
Yeah, baby's coming in January. It'll happen eventually.
Yeah, awesome.
Hey there, Grotto senior producer Josh Long here, and we at Grotto know that finding home can look a lot different depending on who you ask. Alan Graham, for instance, created the Community First Village to help individuals experiencing homelessness. It's a large plot of land in the heart of Texas with A-frames as far as the eye can see. In 2018, Grotto freelancer Chrissy Estrada highlighted this community in a Grotto story called Tiny House Community Shelters Homeless. This is that story.
This guy drives up in the white truck and he tells me, he says, "Hey guy, I got a house for you." And I looked at him and I go, "Yeah, you full of shit too, bro." You know, and I walked off. So 2 years later, here this guy comes and he's handing a bag of food out of his car. "Hey, you want some food?" "Of course I want some." "I still got a house for you," he tells me.
In the outskirts of Austin, Texas, you'll find a whole community built up of tiny houses. This tiny town has an outdoor movie theater, an art studio, an organic garden, and even a tiny chapel. But it's not a haven for hipsters. It's a refuge for the chronically homeless.
You're standing right now on what we consider a new movement here in the United States called Community First. And you're on the Community First Village, a 27-acre master plan community designed to lift up off the streets of Austin, Texas, the most despised, outcast, the most lost and abandoned people that live in our city, the chronically homeless.
In 1998, after answering God's call to serve, Alan and his friends began delivering meals out of the back of a minivan to men and women living on the streets. Years later, the ministry sparked a new vision, a community like no other.
We believe very profoundly that the single greatest cause to homelessness is a profound, catastrophic loss of family. And if there's been some type of a nuclear bomb thrown into the middle of that family unit, I think it's up to the village or the community to step in.
Alan's outreach takes him to the very front lines of the battle against homelessness. For some that he serves, the offering of a home is simply unimaginable.
If God can take a wretch like me, imagine what he can do with the world. This is heaven, man. I'm home.
This episode was produced by Josh Long and Ben Cruz. It was hosted by Sarah Toms and Adrienne Giralde. Drew Malcolm and Tara Kelly were contributing editors. Grotto Network is Director Javi Zubi Zaretta, Senior Editor Josh Noem, Senior Producer Josh Long, Assignment Desk and Event Program Manager Liz Colleran, Web Content Analyst Michaela Douglas, Art Director Becky Rogers, Associate Producer Ben Cruz. Hey, that's me. Social Media Manager Adrienne Giralde. Tara Kelly and Nick Guinea are our treasured interns.
There's news that you have a new job and are going to be moving.
Who told you that? I know, it's so sad. I'm hearing you talk about like how it's taking you a while to get settled, and I'm thinking, oh my gosh, I'm gonna have to do that again.
Yeah.
Josh Long's holding up a sign. He's holding up He's holding up this like tiny notepad that just says, "Will you stay on the pod?" Is this like a proposal? Are you guys saying like, "Please stay on the pod"? It feels like an intervention. I'm sitting around with everyone.